Good afternoon, everybody. Today I'll be presenting on a topic that hits close to home for many working class families, including my own. My paper's titled Wages Not Keeping Up with Urban Sprawl and Inflation. I'll be using basic microeconomic tools like labor, supply, and demand to analyze why real wages have stagnated. This topic feels personal to me because I see it play out in my business to business role every day and in the lives of friends and family. Let's start with the core problem. Real wages, meaning wages adjusted for inflation, aren't rising fast enough. Even if your paycheck looks bigger, your buying power stays flat or actually drops. The basics get hit the hardest: rent, food, gas, groceries. All right, the Bureau of Labor Statistics showed that real average hourly earnings dropped 0.6% in 1 month, even while nominal wages went up. Here's the big picture number. About 70% of the US economy runs on consumer spending. So when wages lag, it's not just a personal problem, it drags down the whole economy. Since the pandemic, inflation has consistently outpaced wage growth, leaving real wages essentially unchanged. So when do wages actually grow? Well, it turns out most real wage growth happens during very specific windows when the economy is expanding and labor markets are tight. The first card covers tight labor markets. Research from the Economic Policy Institute shows that almost all real wage growth from the bottom 90% of earners between 1979 and 2019 happened during just two periods: the late 1990s boom and the 2013 to 2019 expansion. All right, the second concept is what's called the Phillips curve, first described by A.W. Phillips in 1958. It shows that lower unemployment drives faster wage growth. There's also the wage price spiral, which is as wages rise, workers spend more, prices go up, and workers demand even higher pay. And the third concept is about the productivity pay gap. Since 1970s, worker productivity has dramatically outpaced compensation. Workers are producing way more, but their paychecks haven't kept up. Now, putting it in a historical context with two different distinct eras. So, from 1947 to 1973 was the golden era. Worker compensation rose about 91%, while productivity rose 97%. They moved almost in lockstep. So, strong unions, low unemployment, and steady economic growth meant most workers shared in the prosperity. And everything shifted in the mid 1970s. About from 1973 to today, we've seen a massive divergence. Productivity went up 60 to 90%, but typical worker pay only rose 13 to 33%. The only time wages caught up were during those tight labor market windows I talked about earlier. And here's the key connection: the local suburban development cycle fuels urban sprawl and makes the wage gap even worse. So, this is where my perspective comes in. So, the suburban development cycle has four phases that align with commercial real estate cycles as described by Barrett. Uh, Phase one is recovery and expansion. After a slowdown, commercial developers move in first. They build fast food restaurants and strip malls on cheap outlying land. Jobs start appearing, but wages stay low because there's a big pool of workers willing to take these entry level service positions. So phase two is full expansion, and this is where the pattern really shows. People follow the jobs to the suburbs, but housing supply lags behind. Rents and home prices surge. Developers start building subdivisions even further out. And this is classic urban sprawl. Everything spreads out, longer drives to work. All right, the working class gets hurt most because commuting costs act like extra inflation, but employers don't raise pay since the labor supply is still high. Phase three is hypersupply and then maturation. All that construction from the expansion phase creates oversupply. Housing finally catches up in some areas, neighborhoods stabilize, and the labor market tightens. Pay starts creeping up as employers compete for workers, but here's the catch. By this point, much of the new growth has already been eaten up by higher living and commuting costs from the sprawl. So, phase four evolves into recession and saturation. So rental rates drop, property values decline, some businesses even close, and then the whole cycle repeats on the next ring of suburbs. I saw this exact pattern in Tennessee. New strip malls on the edge of town, workers moving in, housing exploding farther out, and restaurant pay barely budging for years despite rising gas prices. This local pattern mirrors the national wage stagnation trends and creates a deadweight loss. So, what's the fix? I'm proposing two linked solutions. First, if you index the federal minimum wage to both inflation and local productivity growth, this means the minimum wage would automatically adjust so working class workers don't fall behind during these early suburban growth phases when businesses open, but housing hasn't caught up yet. And next, offer tax breaks and zoning changes to incentivize mixed use developments, where housing and businesses are built together from the start, not in sequence or sequentially. This directly addresses the business first and housing lag that creates sprawl. These aren't brand new ideas. Economists have discussed stronger wage floors and smarter land use, but I'm specifically targeting the suburban development cycle that makes things worse. So on the strength sides, the strengths and we do a SWOT analysis. On the strength side, an index minimum wage shifts the labor market balance towards workers without causing huge shortages. Research from Michelle and colleagues support this. Workers get real buying power back and spend in their local economy, which helps businesses too. The mixed use incentives shift the housing supply curve earlier in development, keeping rents stable. Overall, this shortens the painful period where working class wages suffer. On the weakness side, in very competitive markets, a higher index wage could lead to some job losses or more automation, especially in fast food. Tax incentives cost the government money. Neighborhoods might oppose zoning changes due to higher upfront costs. And then there could be a short term slowdown in some commercial projects. But I believe the benefits outweigh the costs. Historically, wage cycles and suburban sprawl have kept working class families behind, and these solutions address the root timing problem. So, in conclusion, maintaining a strong economy with sustained low employment is the single best way to raise wages across the board. When labor markets are tight, employers simply can't keep wages low. The wage inflation gap is a real microeconomic problem that's been playing out since the 1970s, and suburban development patterns make it worse. Fast food and strip malls open first, workers move in, housing sprawls outward. And by the time everything catches up, working class families have already absorbed years of stagnant real wages. By combining indexed minimum wages with mixed use development incentives, we could break the cycle. There are some costs, but it's worth it for efficiency, fairness, and real economic opportunity. As I say, fixing this would make the economy fairer for the people who make it run.